Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very, very well. Having a good Friday. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into in the world of professional wrestling. So let's get straight into today's stories. And let's start off with Ricochet, because we spoke about Ricochet earlier this week. Is he not leaving WWE in the near future? What's the status of Ricochet? There have been lots of reports about his contract possibly expiring, him going to AEW, him just leaving the company in general. But Ricochet has taken to Twitter himself to dispel the rumours about him leaving the WWE. Now, Ricochet retweeted an article by Ringside News about his WWE departure and wrote, quote, "This is fake." Now, lately, there's been a lot of speculation about the future of his WWE career, how long he's going to stay with WWE. There were rumours that he signed a 3-year contract in 2018, in January of 2018. Therefore, his contract would be set to expire later this month, and he would therefore be free to either renegotiate with WWE or decide to go elsewhere if he would wish. Now, as I mentioned, there's been a lot of speculation about his WWE career, the future of his WWE career. And as mentioned on social media over the course of the last few days, we've spoken about it here on the channel, it was believed that Ricochet has not yet signed a new contract with the WWE. Now, it's interesting to note that there was a lot of speculation that he wasn't going to re-sign with WWE way back when in September, and he came out then to dispel the rumors that he was going to leave then. There was this report, I think it was by WrestleVotes, came out that said an unnamed WWE superstar had not yet re-signed with WWE, and lots of people put 2 and 2 together and said, I think that's Ricochet, considering the way that Ricochet's been booked on WWE television, especially since he's been called up to the main roster. Now, Ricochet came out then and denied that, the same way that he's came out here and denied that his contract is set to expire this month. Now, as of late, as I mentioned, his booking when it comes to WWE has hardly been stellar. He's often been booked on Main Event. He defeated Drew Gulak on last week's edition of Main Event. Now, it was reported on Tuesday by PW Insider that Ricochet was among those who were at Tropicana Field this past Monday night on Raw, but were not used during the broadcast. So Ricochet's come out again and said, you know, people are talking about it, or he's basically just said that the article saying that he's going to leave WWE, that's fake. It's difficult. It's difficult because if you're a long-time pro wrestling fan, even to be honest, if you're a casual pro wrestling fan and you know how pro wrestling works, and pro wrestling is one giant work, right? And it's very, very rare that pro wrestlers are honest when there are things that are ongoing. So when Ricochet comes out and says, you know what, this is fake, my contract isn't set to expire, or he doesn't even say that, he just says this is fake. Not that I don't believe him, because ultimately what do you have to do? You have to take someone at face value. If they're saying that this is fake, then you have to believe them. The issue is that this is pro wrestling. This is sports entertainment, and everything, you're conditioned as a fan to believe that most things are a work, and I'm not sure if I fully believe Ricochet in this situation, because it does make sense. It does make sense that Ricochet's contract would be set to expire in January of this month, or this month right now, if he signed a 3-year contract in January of 2018. It does make sense, considering the way that Ricochet's been booked ever since he was called up to the main roster, that he would be considering leaving WWE. But it also makes a lot of sense that he would want to stay. Ultimately, this is a pandemic, and ultimately, like many people, their dream is to be with WWE. Financially, I'm sure that he might have re-signed a new deal, and he might financially have a better deal with WWE right now than he had before. There is an element of job security when it comes to WWE. You know, the career and the job's going to be around. WWE isn't disappearing anytime soon, and despite the pandemic and despite the contracts financially being lowered, and despite talents being offered less money on their contracts right now, he can still make a very good amount of money. He can still get a very good deal with the WWE, and he can still have great job security. So there is a lot of discussion when it comes to Ricochet at the moment, and I don't think any big credible source has come out to say Ricochet definitely has or definitely hasn't signed a contract with WWE. There is a lot of speculation. Even the reports saying that Ricochet might be leaving WWE, in their reports, they say from what they've heard, or they don't think. There has been no concrete confirmation from anyone, let alone Ricochet himself, to say that he has or he hasn't signed with WWE. So ultimately, I suppose if Ricochet's coming out and saying that it's fake, then we have to believe that it is fake. Because I think you have to look at it a couple of ways here. If Ricochet's contract does expire at the end of the month, and if Ricochet was set to leave WWE and was planning to leave WWE at the end of the month, why would he come out to say that it is fake? What benefit of that is there to himself to say that report is fake? And you wonder, because there isn't much benefit there, really, unless he wants to highlight it, bring attention to it, and that can therefore be a bit of leverage if he is still negotiating with WWE. that can maybe be a bit of a leverage to an AEW if he's negotiating with them, going, I haven't made my mind up. You might think I'm a sure thing that I'm leaving, but maybe I'm not leaving. I don't know. I don't really see the benefit to Ricochet, why he would come out and say it's fake if he is indeed leaving WWE. Apart from working, I guess, social media and working the audience, so whenever he does show up somewhere, it's surprising. But ultimately, if his contract expires, people will hear that his contract has expired. WWE might even release a statement saying Ricochet isn't going to re-sign a contract. They did that with Jon Moxley. They said, Dean Ambrose, he's not going to re-sign a contract. Maybe they would do that with Ricochet. So I don't really know the situation here. It's very confusing and it's a very muddy water right now when it comes to the status of Ricochet's contract. Ultimately, we will find out soon. I mean, time is ticking, and if it comes to the end of the month, if it comes to February and Ricochet is still on WWE TV, obviously that doesn't exactly mean that he signed a new contract. Rey Mysterio was on WWE TV without a contract in August of last year, but it would suggest, if Ricochet is still on TV around February time or WrestleMania time, that he signed a new deal with WWE. Maybe he signed a new one a long time ago. Jeff Hardy was a great example of this. Jeff Hardy, randomly in an interview with BT Sport, came out last year and said, that's why I re-signed with WWE. And everyone went, what? Jeff Hardy's re-signed? When did that happen? No one saw that happening. And then suddenly everyone starts reporting Jeff Hardy signed a new contract and a contract extension with WWE. So I suppose there's lots of different schools of thought here. Just because we haven't heard that Ricochet has signed a new WWE contract doesn't mean he hasn't. Just because he's saying that the report that he's going to leave WWE is fake doesn't mean it is. So unless we get any real concrete confirmation about it, we just don't know. We just don't know. So we'll have to wait and see on that. When it comes to what I think he'll do next, it's tough. It is tough. I would say if I was giving him advice, if he came to me and said, hey, Owen, well, would you want give me some advice, where should I go next? Not that he would. But if he did come to me, I would say, get out there. Change of scenery, change of environment. You'll be better off elsewhere. And I don't say that as just someone, you're just trying to bash WWE and you just want people to leave WWE. I just think for the betterment of his career, he's probably best suited elsewhere at this time being. I mean, it's obvious. He's on Main Event every week and he's losing to Retribution. And this is a guy, when he was in NXT, people were pitching him to be a future WWE champion or Universal champion. If you look at the way he was booked in Lucha Underground, people would say, this guy's going to be a huge star. If you looked at his work on the independent scene, everyone said this guy, if he goes to WWE, he's a real-life action hero. He'll come to life and he'll be this huge, huge star. He'll make so much money. And WWE, for whatever reason, just couldn't book him correctly. Or Vince McMahon can't book him correctly. They could in NXT, but Vince McMahon in his crazy 70-plus year warped mind just can't book someone like Ricochet correctly. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know. I don't know if he just doesn't get Ricochet. I don't know. And I've mentioned this before when we spoke about Ricochet. I'm not saying that he's perfect. I'm not saying he's the complete package because I don't think he is. I do think there is improvement needed there, especially on the promo side of things. Sometimes he can come across in his promos as just very bad. Sometimes his cadence is very insufferable. Sometimes he can come across quite bland. He can. His work in the ring, that's something else. Because you'll struggle to find anyone on the roster that can work better in the ring than Ricochet, especially doing that crazy stuff that you don't even think is humanly possible. But if you're a good booker, you extenuate the positives, you hide the negatives. And sometimes with WWE, it kind of goes the opposite way around. Sometimes they like to expose the negatives and hide the positives, which is just bizarre, but sometimes that's how WWE books things. So I don't know. Ricochet, I think at the moment there is, like I said, the water is very muddy when it comes to Ricochet, and we just don't know. We just don't know. But it's certainly something that is going to rumble on, and we'll surely find out more soon. Let's talk about AEW and NXT because, of course, the ratings came out last night for NXT and AEW Dynamite New Year Smash Night 2. And once again, cable news is dominating all of cable right now. So, as expected, viewership was reasonably low for the Wednesday Night Wars. The Wednesday Night War saw Dynamite once again defeat WWE NXT in viewership and in ratings. Wednesday's New Year Smash Night 2 edition of Dynamite drew 762,000 live viewers on TNT. This is up about 15% from last week, topping the 551,000, which is down about 14% garnered by WWE NXT on the USA Network. This is according to Nielsen via Showbuzz Daily. Now, AEW ranked 31 in the cable top 150 for the 18 to 49 demo, while NXT ranked 70th. AEW ranked number 68 in total viewership, while NXT ranked 81st in viewership. Now, the fact that AEW ranked as 31 in the cable top 150 is actually quite staggering, because AEW, a lot of the time, has been ranked not first, but third, fourth, sometimes second. So the fact they're on 31st, that shows you how dominated cable news has been doing with the ratings right now, obviously for a variety of reasons, which we'll touch on. Now, last week's Dynamite New Year Smash Night 1 drew 662,000 live viewers and ranked 48 in the cable top 150 and 75th in viewership. Last week's WWE NXT New Year's Evil show drew 641,000 live viewers and ranked 68 in the cable top 150 and 80th in viewership. Now, AEW drew a 0.30 rating, which is up 20% from last week in the key 18 to 49 demographic, while NXT drew 0.14, which is down 12.5% in the same demo this week. Last week's AEW show drew a 0.25 rating, while the NXT episode drew a 0.16 in that demographic. Now, this week's AEW viewership was up from last week, but on the lower end of what the show has been doing regularly. Besides last week, this was the lowest viewership and key demo rating since Thanksgiving week of 2020. This week's Dynamite viewership was also down 19% from the same week in 2020. So AEW isn't immune to the pattern that is cursing all of pro wrestling and frankly television at the moment, whereby year on year they are still declining in terms of viewership if you look at year to date in the same week. Now, this week's NXT episode drew the second worst audience for a first run show behind the March 18, 2020 episode, which was the first show with no fans. That show drew 542,000 live viewers with a 0.16 rating in the key demo. Last night's key demo rating for NXT was tied with several other episodes to be the third lowest behind the December 30, 2020 show, which went up against the AEW Brody Lee tribute show, and behind the May 20, 2020 show. This week's NXT viewership was down 21% from the same week in 2020. Now, it's clear, obviously, as I mentioned, that cable news channels once again impacted the pro wrestling viewership for another week. For the second week in a row, the cable news shows dominated on Wednesday night due to the second impeachment for President Trump. Obviously, that is what is dominating cable at the moment. Obviously, the prior week was the issues going on in Washington as well, and then the following week it was the impeachment, so it was expected. It was expected that NXT and AEW would suffer because of that. I think AEW will be pleased that they still managed to increase what they did last week, despite everything that's been going on, but as I mentioned, it's still on the low sides of what they've been doing at the moment, but frankly, you can't... People can say all they want about the product and they'll say, well, it was low numbers for NXT and AEW. They can't control what's going on in the world of politics and just society and culture right now. You've got the pandemic. You've got this stuff with politics and elections and etc. The world is a crazy place at the moment. And ultimately, pro wrestling is as much as it might be for you and I one of our topmost priorities, it's just not the priority for a lot of people at the moment. And that is completely justified. That is completely justified. All AEW and NXT can do right now is continue to put out a good product for those that are watching. They've got to still do their best to try and get people to watch and try and say, look, the world is crazy at the moment. If you want to have some form of escapism, if you want to have some form of forgetting what craziness is going on around us in the world right now, maybe tune in for a couple of hours of pro wrestling. You won't regret it. That's the best they can do right now. And if the numbers go up, that's fantastic. If they go down, that's to be expected. I think the ratings discussion, people don't like to talk about it anyway. I do think it's justified. That's why we talk about it here, because there are important points that do need to be discussed when it comes to the ratings, and it does reflect a certain element of the product and the way the show's booked and the way that fans are feeling about the product. But nevertheless, it's kind of, I don't want to say it takes a backseat, but it's just not as important right now because those numbers are what they are. And ultimately, AEW and NXT can't control what's going on in Washington or the wider society when it comes to the things like the pandemic. All they can do right now is put on the best show possible and hope that people tune in. Maybe when the world gets back to normal, whenever that is, if there ever is a normal, they can start to have a more positive discussion about where improvements need to be made and how numbers are low or high and stuff like that. I think that's the best way to look at it. I mean, it doesn't excuse if you're doing a bad show and people aren't tuning in. I mean, there is discussions there. I'm not going to let Raw get off the hook, but you have to look at AEW and NXT for the last 2 Wednesdays. There have been pretty serious stuff going on in the world, frankly. So they are what they are. They really are what they are. Speaking of AEW, we spoke about yesterday that Chris Jericho revealed in a recent episode of his podcast, Talk is Jericho, that he had tested positive for COVID-19 back in September of 2020. Now, this was the same time that Nick Jackson also opened up about his COVID-19 battle in September as well, as a COVID outbreak in both WWE and AEW, while other wrestlers like Lance Archer and Ben Carter had also tested positive. Now, on a recent edition of Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer noted that this string of positive COVID tests came around September 12th during AEW's run of TV tapings. Brian Alvarez pointed out that while Jericho was still on TV during this time, there was enough time between tapings for Jericho, as he said on the podcast, to quarantine and self-isolate himself. This was in response to people questioning, what is the time frame going on here? Did he quarantine for the right amount of time? Did he even attend these TV tapings while still testing positive or still being at risk to others? Now, the time frame would have been from September 11 through September 23, meaning that there would have been enough time for Jericho to isolate himself for the necessary 10 days. At the next TV taping, Jericho tested negative, allowing him to continue working. Meltzer noted that Jackson got the virus at the same time as Jericho. Jackson was out longer than Jericho as he missed the next taping, but returned at the following TV tapings. It was noted that Jericho believes he contracted the virus from a family friend. Neither Jericho nor any of his family members had any symptoms, but the family friend tested positive, causing Jericho to go out and get a COVID-19 test where he also tested positive. So, it's interesting. I think when it comes to this Jericho story about testing positive for COVID, lots of people obviously were quick to jump on him because we know Jericho's become a controversial figure, frankly, over the last 12 months. He certainly has. There was always, and there still will be, a lot of love for Chris Jericho, but he's opened up about his opinions and beliefs on certain issues, certain hot topic issues, whether it comes to the current pandemic or when it comes to his political beliefs as well. And it certainly has had a lot of people lose some respect for Jericho when it comes to his beliefs outside of pro wrestling or his behavior outside of pro wrestling. I don't know if I've lost any respect for Jericho about his beliefs when it comes to the pandemic, working that Sturgis event with no mask, and that was a super spreader event. His political beliefs as well, I don't know if that actually makes me lose any respect for what he's done in pro wrestling. I certainly don't agree with any of it. I don't agree with his political beliefs, really don't believe for his political beliefs. It was quite shocking to see the amount of money he had donated to the Trump campaign in the last election. I mean, that was the amount of money that some people earn in a year. Jericho was donating to the Trump campaign. And when it comes to his opinion on the pandemic, you know, he did work that event at Sturgis. He did not wear a mask, and that was a super spreader event, and it was just prior to when he tested positive. Now, Dave Meltzer is saying that Jericho believes that he contracted the virus from a family friend. We don't know if that is the case or not, but he did test positive. So I don't agree with any of those things that Jericho has done over the last 12 months or so. I don't think I've lost any respect for what he's done in the ring or anything like that. I don't know if I'm less of a Jericho fan, but it is something that plays on your mind during that period of time. Ultimately, when it comes to people jumping on Jericho after he announced that he had tested positive back in September, this is what I said yesterday when we spoke about it. We didn't know the time frame. Now it looks like we do know the time frame. There is no chance, to quote Vince McMahon and a text message that he would send to the XFL commissioner, there is no chance in hell that Chris Jericho would have attended and performed an AEW Dynamite taping if he had still tested positive or he was at any risk to anyone on the AEW roster. It's just too much of a risk. And I know people will say, well, it's Chris Jericho. He's the highest paid guy in the company. He's a legend. He can pretty much do what he wants. He's got carte blanche. He can do anything. He's Chris Jericho. If he'd have tested positive, they would have kept him away. And that is the flat out facts of it. That just is. I mentioned the testing policy when it comes to AEW and WWE for that matter, and we'll talk about it again now. WWE and AEW have different testing policies. WWE's testing policy, this is when they were in Orlando at the Amway Center. I don't know if it's the same in terms of location, but it'll probably be the same in terms of the mechanism and logistics of it. The day before a show, WWE Talents goes to this parking garage, essentially, and they all get COVID tests. And it's the COVID test where it's the one up the nose, and they put it in the thing, and they basically get that result back a day later, the day of the taping. They get that result back, or it's either a day later, the day of the taping in the morning, or later that night on the day that they get the test. If it comes back as negative, they get their stuff for TV, they get the creative plans, that's what they do. If it tests positive, they then have to quarantine, they can't come to the building. That testing happens off-site. Now, AEW's testing is slightly different. The day of the Dynamite tapings, or a pay-per-view or whatever, there is a separate testing place outside of Daly's place. It's not far away, but it's away from Daly's place. They go there, they get a blood test. They test for COVID, they get the results rapidly back in about 20 minutes or so. If they test negative, they then get a wristband and they're allowed to be taken over to Daly's place, and they're allowed in Daly's place. If you do not have that wristband, you are not allowed anywhere near Daly's place, and you certainly aren't allowed in Daly's place. If you test positive, you will not get a wristband, you'll be taken away, you'll quarantine, and you won't be allowed back anywhere near Daly's place unless you test negative. So I never felt for any second that Jericho would have attended any Dynamite tapings if he had tested positive. I never felt that if Jericho or Tony Khan or anyone, for that matter, felt that he was a risk to anyone on the AEW roster, that he would have attended those tapings. Now, I know some people, especially when Taz made that sloppy shop comment, people are looking to discredit AEW or looking to say, well, look, you're not perfect, blah, blah, blah. That's just pro wrestling on social media. For some reason, fans are incredibly tribal when it comes to WWE and AEW. I don't get it. I don't understand it. That's what people are. Ultimately, the most important thing when it comes to anything like this is that people recover. They recover quickly, and everyone else around them and themselves, their family, their loved ones, anyone they attend the tapings, whatever. The most important thing is that people are safe and people are healthy. And as I've mentioned before, when it comes to WWE and AEW, of any of these outbreaks, ultimately, you have to remember the time we're in right now. If you insist on doing these live shows or even TV tapings or whatever during a pandemic where there is a contagious virus going around, you run the risk of contracting the virus. Because the only way of avoiding it is staying at home, not going outside, wearing the mask, social distancing, all of that stuff. And ultimately, if you are insisting on putting on these shows during the pandemic, you run the risk. And that's what happens. And that might sound cold and callous, but that's what it is. That is what it is at the moment, unfortunately. So I never felt that Jericho was putting anyone at risk. I never felt that AEW was putting anyone at risk. So we have a better update when it comes to the timeline now. Let's talk about Charlotte Flair. This is a really interesting story because Charlotte Flair has lashed out over a column on social media that was discussing the heat she receives as a WWE superstar from fans on social media. Now, WWE Women's Tag Team Champion Charlotte Flair took to Twitter yesterday and lashed out over a column written about how she's booked and the heat she receives from fans online. Now, Flair noted that she probably should have just blocked the article and kept on scrolling, but she believes that words matter, so she went ahead with her response. Now, the article was titled, I believe it was a Daily DDT article, but it was titled, "Does Charlotte Flair deserve the hate that she gets?" And the caption reads, "Charlotte Flair catches a lot of heat for how WWE books her." Now, this is what Charlotte Flair had to say on the matter. She said, quote, "I should just scroll and block this garbage, but words matter. So I will take a few moments to educate you, since both a human and I would assume an editor allowed this BS to sully Al Gore's internet." Flair then defended the time off that she's had and said she doesn't see a similar article where a male superstar is knocked for taking time off and returning to a title chase. She said, quote, "I have taken time off 3 times while on the main roster. First time when my dad was sick. The second time was a 6-week injury that was followed up by 18 months of staring at the lights to help create a star. Third time is now. What exactly is it that I'm avoiding? I keep looking for the article where you trash one of the male champions for taking time off and being inserted back into the title picture. Don't find one. Shocking. Wonder why," and then she put an emoji with the eyes rolling. Now, Flair ended her response by pointing out how she will always be in the title picture because of how good she is. She said, quote, "I am in the title picture and I will always be in the title picture. It's one of those unfortunate side effects of excelling at something you wouldn't understand," end quote. Now, she hasn't made any further tweets about this article at the time of recording right now, and it certainly was interesting. Now, this is a tough one. Let's break down the quotes. I think that's the best way to address this. Let's break down the quotes. So she talks about taking the time off on the roster first, and she said she took the time off when her father was sick. The second time was a 6-week injury, and then she said that was followed up by 18 months of staring at the lights to help create a star. Is she referring to Becky Lynch there? Because that is debatable. I think Becky Lynch got over at expense of Charlotte Flair, but not out of design. You have to look back on that whole feud. Becky Lynch wasn't supposed to get over during that period of time. Charlotte Flair was a babyface. All right, let's go back to that situation way back when, 2018, SummerSlam. It was scheduled to be Carmella versus Becky Lynch at SummerSlam. Then they do the angle where actually Charlotte Flair gets inserted into that match because she beats her friend. And then at SummerSlam, Charlotte Flair wins, even though the whole building wanted Becky Lynch to win. At the end of that match, Charlotte Flair won, and Becky Lynch turned heel. Becky Lynch was meant to get booed, and the crowd popped massively because they were tired of seeing Charlotte Flair in that picture. That's one bit there. And she can say, oh, we laid on my back for ages to help make a new star. Becky Lynch got over. I don't know if that was necessarily Charlotte Flair putting her over in that scenario. And then in the build to WrestleMania, everyone wanted to see Becky Lynch versus Ronda Rousey in that main event. And for whatever reason, WWE decided that that main event, I don't know, wasn't good enough, couldn't sell enough. We need to have Charlotte Flair in there. Charlotte Flair was inserted into that main event. There is no doubt about that. Now, there are a variety of reasons why she was inserted into that main event. Is it because she's fantastic in the ring? Is it because she's one of the best female performers in WWE? Or just performers in general? Absolutely. That is why she was inserted in there. But she didn't need to be. She didn't need to be. So I'm not sure about staring up at the lights to help create a new star. I'm not sure about that. And then you talk about the third time. I don't know if really people are criticising her for taking time off. I'm not sure if that's really the case. I don't think anyone says, oh, Charlotte Flair taking time off and coming straight back into the title picture. I think the overall discussion is about constantly being in the title picture. You look at what happened last year. Charlotte Flair wasn't scheduled to win the Royal Rumble last year. It was Shayna Baszler. And at the last minute, Vince McMahon decided Charlotte Flair's got to win the Royal Rumble. Charlotte Flair wins the Royal Rumble, but she's not going to go after the Raw or SmackDown Women's Championship because the Raw Women's Championship was scheduled already to be Becky Lynch versus Shayna Baszler. The SmackDown Women's Championship, I think, originally would have been Bayley and Sasha Banks. Plans changed. It went to that Fatal 5-Way or whatever that was. But they had Charlotte Flair win the Royal Rumble. Why? Because Charlotte Flair needed, in the eyes of WWE, to be in a featured spot at WrestleMania and to go after a championship. But she couldn't go after this Raw SmackDown Women's Championship, so they put her in the NXT Women's Championship picture. People are saying this is a good way. Charlotte Flair mentions laying on her back for 18 months to create a new star. This is a great way to make a new star in Rhea Ripley and help elevate the NXT brand. Charlotte Flair wins that match. People weren't happy about that. But I think some people were saying, well, you know what? She did beat the young upstart WrestleMania, but Charlotte Flair on NXT, this would be massive in terms of the Wednesday Night Wars. But it didn't serve any purpose, really. It didn't help NXT. And I understand the pandemic. And I understand the chaos during that period of time. I get it. But you have to look back on it and you have to reflect on it. It didn't serve NXT any help at all. It certainly didn't help Rhea Ripley. She's only just maybe coming to the main roster now where she had a ton of momentum, so that didn't work for her. And you have to look at how many title reigns Charlotte Flair has had. She's got to beat her father easily. What's she on at the moment? 10? 11? She's been on the main roster. When did she make her debut? 2015? Was it 2015? So she's been on the roster 5 and a bit years, and she's had 10 title reigns, 2 a year. That's insanity. And some of those reigns have only been a couple of weeks. They have been inflated. They have been inflated, and you can't say that Charlotte Flair isn't constantly in that title picture. You just can't. You just can't. And there does seem to be a situation where WWE feels like she has to be in there. And I understand her point of view. I do totally understand her point of view. In the sense that if you are one of the best and you're one of the biggest stars, you should be in the title picture. And I don't disagree with that either. Charlotte Flair should be floating around the title picture a lot. She should be in the main event. But constantly, we've seen the same thing when it comes to Roman Reigns or John Cena. If they're constantly there, fans turn. Fans like new. Fans like new. Now, whether that's a new character, a new superstar, a new champion, fans like new. The attention span is very short, and when you're told by the company, this person's great, you have to like this person wins, they win, and it's being forced down your throat, fans rebel very quickly. And we saw the same with Roman Reigns and John Cena, and fans know what they want. Fans know what they want. Fans wanted a change to John Cena. Fans wanted a change to Roman Reigns, and they got it with Roman Reigns, and guess what? They like him now. They really like him because they got what they wanted. And with Charlotte Flair, I don't discredit what she says because I do agree with her. She is absolutely one of the best in WWE right now, and there certainly is an argument, and I wouldn't discredit it, to say that she is arguably the best female WWE superstar of all time. Absolutely. When she retires and she leaves WWE, people will say, oh, I wish Charlotte Flair would come back. Charlotte Flair was one of the best. You look at some of her matches, they're phenomenal. She is one of the best WWE superstars of all time, male or female. Certainly as a female, she's right up there. Right up there. And you can't argue that. And maybe that is why she's in the main event all the time. And maybe that's why she deserves to be in the main event all the time. But there are elements of truth to both sides here. There absolutely are, because some of her title reigns haven't been needed. Some of her title reigns have been inflated. And sometimes it does feel like, man, she doesn't need to be in that picture all the time. She doesn't. Because even earlier this year, as I mentioned, she was shoehorned into that NXT Women's Championship picture that didn't benefit Rhea Ripley or NXT. So she did that title reign for a while. It really didn't do anything. She lost the NXT Women's Championship. She didn't get pinned at that takeover either. Had a fantastic match, which is why she's in the main event. Had a fantastic match, but she didn't get pinned. What happened straight away? The moment she lost that NXT Women's Championship, it was on a Sunday. NXT takeover in your house. The next day on Monday Night Raw, bang, she was straight into the Raw Women's Championship picture. She pinned Asuka on that show. Hardly anyone does that. And for a couple of weeks, she was in that picture once again, and she gets written off of TV. I don't think anyone is saying, oh, Charlotte Flair, she takes time off and she comes straight back. I think the discussion is, should she be in that main event title picture all the time? Like right now, I don't think anyone had a problem with her coming back and being a women's tag team champion. That's great. The issue people have is what's happened to Asuka? What's happened to the Raw Women's Championship? It feels like Asuka's helped carry the division on Raw for months. She's helped carry the Raw Women's Championship for months. Next thing you know, Charlotte Flair's back and suddenly Asuka, who's Asuka? She disappears. We've got Charlotte Flair. She's back. She's the one we want in the main event picture. So there is right for people to be disgruntled, but there is right for Charlotte Flair to say, look, what can I do? What is Charlotte Flair meant to do? Say no. Okay, Charlotte, we want you to win the NXT Women's Championship at WrestleMania. Okay, Charlotte, we want you to win the Royal Rumble. Okay, Charlotte, we want you to be involved and win the Women's Tag Team Championship or win the SmackDown or Raw Women's Championship. What's she meant to say? No, I don't think that's a good idea. She will say yes, thank you, and she's doing her job. It's not Charlotte Flair's fault. I don't think Charlotte Flair deserves the heat that she gets. It's the higher-ups. It's the creative. They deserve the heat that Charlotte Flair gets. But I agree with both sides, and I don't know if it's necessarily fair of Charlotte Flair to... I don't think she's attacked the person that wrote this article, but I'm not sure it's necessarily fair to go in that hard. She's defending herself, and that's totally right. But you have to know what comes with that as well. When she goes in on an article like that, the writer of that article is probably getting bombarded. I don't think, frankly, Daily DDT care, because that's clicks, that's ad revenue. So, look, it's a story that's blown up, and it's a story that will always be discussed. The Charlotte Flair being in the title picture is something that's been discussed for a long, long time. And it certainly won't be the last time, and it certainly isn't the first time. Let's talk and move on about Dark Side of the Ring. One of my favourite programs over the course of the last few years. Dark Side of the Ring, the first season, the second season, just phenomenal. It's on Vice. If you haven't ever seen Dark Side of the Ring, go watch it. I think some of the episodes are on YouTube now that Vice have uploaded. If you haven't, go find them on your cable system or whatever. It's a great program. If you're a student of the business, if you love pro wrestling, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Now, season 3, people are always talking about season 3, and it has been announced that Stone Cold Steve Austin will appear on Dark Side of the Ring season 3, the premiere episode about Flying Brian Pillman. Yes, Vice TV has revealed that the Dark Side of the Ring season 3 premiere will focus on the life and career of the late Brian Pillman. Now, WWE Hall of Famer Steve Austin will appear on the Season 3 premiere episode to discuss his former tag team partner and friend. Of course, Steve Austin and Brian Pillman, they're part of the Hollywood Bronze in WCW. They had a brief feud in WWE as well. The Pillmans got a gun angle from '96, one of the most famous, infamous WWE angles of all time. Now, Austin will discuss his appearance on the Dark Side of the Ring, plus his own career and retirement during an episode of Vice TV's Carrie and Jamil Won't Stick to Sports show. That's on Vice, and that's where it was announced. Now, there's no word on when the Season 3 will premiere on Vice, but if we get an update on that, we'll talk to you about that here on the show. But it has been reported that other Season 3 topics will include XPW, FMW, Nick Gage, the WCW New Japan Pro Wrestling Collision in Korea event from 1995. That was actually in North Korea. And the Smith family, which is Grizzly Smith and his children, Sam Houston, Rockin' Robin, and WWE Hall of Famer Jake the Snake Roberts. Now, if you haven't seen Dark Side of the Ring, obviously the clue is in the title. They focus on the darker aspects of pro wrestling, whether it's deaths, substance abuse, controversial incidents. They've done episodes on the Benoit and Eddie Guerrero tragedy. They've done episodes on Bruiser Brody, Gino Hernandez, the Owen Hart tragedy. So you kind of, the murder of Dina Bravo. They've done lots of episodes, and they've all been fantastic. And even some things like the UWF, that's probably my favourite episode, and it's an episode I really didn't know a lot about it. Herb Abrams going into that, I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. So I'm really excited for Season 3. There are so many stories when it comes to the world of pro wrestling that have been fantastic, and I have no doubt they'll do a fantastic job there. I think even Brian Pillman Jr. noted a while ago on social media that they were going to do an episode about his father. Obviously, his father, Brian Pillman, died at the age of 37 or 38 in 1997 whilst he was under contract to WWE at the time, so I'm sure they'll address that. The aftermath of that is very murky as well, so it'll be interesting, no doubt, to see that, and they do a fantastic job. So I'm very excited to see about Steve Austin on Dark Side of the Ring. Let's jump back to AEW because we did a story yesterday talking about Sonny Kiss. It was reported or announced by Tony Schiavone during the AEW Dynamite post show that Sonny Kiss was currently dealing with an injury when a fan asked him, "Where's Sonny Kiss right now? We haven't seen him on TV for a while." Now, AEW star Sonny Kiss has clarified the report that he's currently out of action due to injury. Now, the story about a potential injury began circulating on Wednesday night. During the AEW Dynamite post show, AEW commentator Tony Schiavone was asked by a fan about Sonny Kiss's whereabouts. Schiavone replied, quote, "He's been injured. I've seen him in the training room, so he's been banged up. I've seen him in the gym, but he's just not able to perform. He's a tremendous athlete." Now, on Thursday afternoon, Sonny Kiss set the record straight on social media. He said, quote, "I'm not sure how this narrative got started that I was injured, but baby girl is totally okay, just an FYI. He also CC'd Tony Schiavone in there. Sonny Kiss also said, quote, "Be sure to tune in to AEW Dark and AEW Dynamite as always." Tony Schiavone then replied saying, quote, "Great news. I was asked where you'd been and I had no answer except that I'd seen you in the training room recently." And then Sonny Kiss responded saying, quote, "Haha, I just get the trainer to adjust me every now and then because I have a tight dancer hips and hold stress in my neck from time to time, but I'm totally okay." So there you go. Sonny Kiss isn't injured. Expect to see him once again soon on AEW Dynamite or Dark. So glad to hear that Sonny Kiss is not currently injured. We don't see anyone out of action with injuries. Let's talk about Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley, because this has been a match I think everyone's wanted to see for ages, right? Bobby Lashley, Brock Lesnar, two former MMA stars, two absolute powerhouses, two giant men in the world of pro wrestling and MMA. Everyone's wanted to see the match. That's the reason Bobby Lashley came back to WWE in the first place, was to have his dream match against Brock Lesnar. Well, WWE United States Champion Bobby Lashley is still open to facing the Beast Incarnate. The Lashley versus Lesnar match is something fans have wanted to see for several years now, and Lashley has made it clear several times in media interviews he also wants the match to happen. Now, a fan tweeted earlier yesterday about Lashley versus Lesnar possibly happening, and Lashley responded. The CEO of the Hurt Business noted that once he takes care of a Brock wannabe in being Matt Riddle, he will be ready for Lesnar anytime or any place. He said, quote, "Once I'm done taking out this Brock wannabe, as I've said for years, I'll take Lesnar whenever, wherever." Lashley easily retained his United States Championship over Riddle on Monday's edition of Raw, but looks like the Riddle versus Hurt Business feud will continue as Riddle called MVP back to the ring and defeated him by disqualification due to interference from the United States Champion. Now, Riddle versus Lashley has been rumoured for the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. I think Lashley has also declared himself for the Royal Rumble. I think Riddle probably will as well. When it comes to Brock Lesnar's status at the moment, of course, Brock Lesnar isn't under contract to WWE. His contract expired sometime last year. They're still negotiating. It's been heavily rumoured that he will eventually come to terms with Vince McMahon. It's just the Vince McMahon Brock Lesnar dance that is ongoing. It's just a little bit longer than usual because we're currently in a pandemic. Brock doesn't need the money. Vince at the moment doesn't need Brock. It's one of those situations. But Brock Lesnar has been away from WWE for a while since dropping the WWE Championship to Drew McIntyre at WrestleMania 36. But he is expected to be back in the WWE picture around the time of WrestleMania 37. Will he face Bobby Lashley? I doubt it. I think there's been rumours of him possibly facing Drew McIntyre again, maybe Keith Lee. I don't know. I would love to see it. I think everyone would love to see it. To say that we would love to see it with this Brock Lesnar Bobby Lashley match is ridiculous because we've always wanted to see it for years at this point. For years. Who doesn't want to see Brock Lesnar versus Bobby Lashley? It's a money match. It's an absolute money match. I even said before when Raw Underground was a thing, book Brock Lesnar versus Bobby Lashley in that. Make the most of Raw Underground. Obviously, Raw Underground isn't even a thing anymore. But I hopefully we will see it. That's the reason, as I mentioned, Bobby Lashley came back, was to have the match against Brock Lesnar. So I really hope he gets that just for the sake of Bobby Lashley, because that's why he came back. So hopefully we will see it. We have an update when it comes to some NXT injuries as well, coming out of NXT on Tuesday, or Wednesday rather. The latest NXT injury report video with Matt Camp, featuring updates on NXT Superstars, is now available. The following injuries were announced coming out of this week's NXT episode on the USA Network, which are usually part of storylines, at least for the most part. So the injuries that they announced were Kyle O'Reilly re-aggravating his jaw injury in the attack from Pete Dunne and NXT Tag Team Champions Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch. He is not currently cleared to compete, as doctors reportedly pushed back his clearance date. Current NXT champion Finn Balor has re-aggravated his arm injury during the attack from Dunne, Lorcan and Burch. His current status is listed as day-to-day. Valentina Feroz suffered multiple injuries to the face and body after being squashed by Xia Li and then attacked after the match. She's currently not cleared to compete. So as I mentioned, these are storylines injuries. So I think, well, they're storyline injuries for the most part. The fact that all of these people were physical on Wednesday, means they're cleared, obviously. Finn Balor and Kyle O'Reilly, they'll be cleared to compete soon, and I'm sure we'll see this feud with the Undisputed Era and Finn Balor continue with Pete Dunne and his tag team, where Pat McAfee comes in. Of course, he was pulled from television. Maybe he'll come back into it at some point as well. We'll have to wait and see. But those injuries largely are for storyline purposes. We have another entrant declared for the Royal Rumble, as The Miz has announced his WWE Royal Rumble spot. The Miz has announced his entry for the upcoming men's Royal Rumble match. The Miz appeared on TMZ Sports yesterday, along with WWE Women's Tag Team Champion and Raw Women's Champion Asuka. Yes, she does still exist, and declared his spot in the 30-man Royal Rumble match. Miz said that he's focused on returning to the main event of WrestleMania. There are now 24 spots open for the men's Rumble match. The Miz joins the likes of Daniel Bryan, Bobby Lashley, AJ Styles, Randy Orton, and Otis as confirmed participants for the match on January 31. Now, it's interesting because when The Miz actually announced that he was going to declare himself for the Royal Rumble, frankly, everyone said, why bother? Why bother? If you want to be in the main event of WrestleMania, if you say, my goal is to win the Royal Rumble and be in the main event of WrestleMania, why not just cash in your Money in the Bank briefcase? Why not just say, look, I've got this Money in the Bank briefcase, regardless of what the match is, who's in the match, I'm going to be in the main event of WrestleMania. Why win the Royal Rumble to get there? I mean, logic. I know logic in the world of pro wrestling, you know, you're asking for trouble. I get it, but it just seemed really odd. Why would The Miz say that? I'm going to win the Royal Rumble and I'm going to get back to WrestleMania. I'm going to outlast 29 other men, even though I've got a briefcase that puts me ahead of everyone else. I mean, logic. Where is the logic? There is none. There is no logic there. Sheamus has been talking about Drew McIntyre's upcoming match with Goldberg and discussed if it will be a bad match for Drew McIntyre at the Royal Rumble. Now, right now, at the moment, of course, fans are very divided whether or not they want to see this match happen with Goldberg and Drew McIntyre at the Royal Rumble. For Sheamus, he said he's tried to block out the negative feedback he's seen and heard online. He said he tries to persuade the indecisive fans by mentioning how this match could cement McIntyre's legacy as a world champion. He said, quote, I know a lot of people, they read the stuff online and you read the stuff on Twitter and all that, and it seems like a lot of people are angry about it. I know some who think Bill Goldberg doesn't deserve an opportunity against Drew McIntyre, but Goldberg definitely made an impression back in WCW. I will make reference to that was in the late 1990s and we're in 2021, but whatever. I mean, he brought this new element, you know, destroying people in a short amount of time and the streak. He's also a multi-time world champion and he does keep himself in great shape. I don't think this is going to be a bad match for Drew. I think it's another opportunity for Drew to cement his legacy by going against people like Goldberg and ultimately beating them. Maybe he can go in there and take him out pretty fast. It'll be interesting to see. Now, obviously, Sheamus is going to say that. That is the corporate WWE answer. The reason the fans are divided on this online is because they do think maybe a full-time superstar should get the opportunity on a big show to face McIntyre at the Royal Rumble. I take Sheamus's point that defeating Goldberg may cement him as a big-time WWE champion. I get it. The reason people are really concerned, though, is because Goldberg in these World Championship matches has a very good track record of destroying the younger, promising superstar. Kevin Owens, The Fiend, and Drew McIntyre could legitimately be next. That's why people are concerned. And actually, going back to what Charlotte Flair was saying earlier, saying, I don't see any other male people criticizing male superstars for coming back and going straight into the title picture. They very much do. Whether it's Brock Lesnar or Goldberg, people do complain. Watch social media, they do. So I don't know if it'll be a bad match for Drew McIntyre. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I don't think the reason people are critical about it or undecided on it online is because they think Bill Goldberg's not deserving of it. Goldberg's a Hall of Famer. He has done great things in his career. People are concerned and divided on it because they think Goldberg might win, because WWE has conditioned us to say if Goldberg's in a World Championship match around WrestleMania season, he's going to win. That's the real concern right there. So Sheamus thinks it'll be a good match because of course he would. Of course he would think that. And finally, we have some new ring names for several WWE talents. Several new WWE NXT ring names have been revealed. NXT superstar Emily Anzulis is now going by the name of Ivy Nile. Anzulis was signed in January of 2020 after competing on The Rock's Titan Games on NBC. She also trained at the Jacobs Pritchard Wrestling Academy, owned by Kane and Dr. Tom Pritchard. Anzulis made her in-ring debut at a February NXT live event and later worked at an NXT TV Battle Royal last September. She was also featured on Raw Underground last summer, losing to Shayna Baszler. NXT UK superstar Tony Gill is now going by Rohan Raja. Gill was formerly known as Gursinghar Singh of the Desi Hit Squad in Impact Wrestling. He was trained by Lance Storm at a Storm Wrestling Academy and was signed to WWE to work on the NXT UK brand last last fall. WWE has also renamed 3 Indian wrestlers who were announced as new WWE Performance Center recruits in January of 2020. Govinda Singh is now being called as Dilsha Shanky. Lakshmikrant Rajput is now going by Guru Raj, and Sukhwinder Grewal is now being called Giant Sanjay. Now, Shanky and Sanjay are proteges of former WWE World Heavyweight Champion the Great Khali. All 3 Indian talent were announced for WWE's upcoming Superstar Spectacle event earlier this week, along with NXT, Raw, and SmackDown Superstars. So there you go, some new names for several WWE talents. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of the news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts about all of these news stories in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved with the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.